it's time. Hey grandkids. I wanted to continue my series on interesting people by talking about a man named Hiroo Onoda. He was a Japanese holdout from World War II. After World War II, not all the Japanese on some of the remote islands surrendered. Some of them didn't know the war ended, and some of them were stuck in places. But this particular guy, his name is Hiroo Onoda, and he was a commanding officer of 3 men, and he was specifically told, no matter what happened, not to commit suicide, which might sound strange to you and me, but it was part of their warrior mentality as Japanese. Anyway, in 1944, he went to a Philippine island, and I'll put the name of the island here. I can't remember it. I think it's Lubang, but I'm not 100% sure. And he had 3 guys with him, and they were supposed to just fight guerrilla war. And they weren't the only guys on the island doing it. But I remember when I was a kid hearing about these Japanese guys that had been found on these islands. And it was like when they found Hiroo Onoda in 1974. So let me go back a little bit. The war ended, and these guys didn't give up because they didn't know the war ended. And when they got leaflets dropped on them saying, "Hey, the war is over, you can come down off the mountain," they thought it was fake. They thought they were trying to fool them into surrendering. So they didn't surrender. And then some more leaflets got dropped on them, and they still didn't believe it. Anyway, so this goes on, and they run their little guerrilla war, burning rice and shooting at the police. And anyway, about 1949, I guess it was 1949, one of the guys decided to give up, and in the beginning of 1950 surrendered to Philippine authorities. So there's 3 of them left, and then some years after that, another guy got a shootout, and he got killed in the shootout. So he died. So there was down to 2 of them. In 1972, his last soldier was killed in a shootout with the police. So then he was by himself from 1972 until the beginning of 1974, when this Japanese adventurer guy decided he wanted to go look for him. He had a couple other things that he wanted to look for, but the first thing he wanted to find was this Japanese guy that was holding out on this island. So he went and he found him in about 4 days, and they kind of made friends, but the Hiroo Onoda still didn't believe. He still didn't believe him. He said, "My war's not over." I was never told by my commander, his commander, going back again, but his commander had specifically told him that whether it was 3 years or 5 years, no matter how long it took, he'd come back for him. So this Japanese adventurer goes back to Japan and gets in contact with the government. They find his commanding officer, get him to go back to this island. He goes out to this island and gets Hiroo Onoda to quit. He hands his sword to President Marcos, who's the president of the Philippines at the time, and Marcos pardons him. And he pardoned him for, I guess they killed like 30 people while they were on that island fighting their war. He goes back to Japan anyway as an older guy. I mean, been fighting this war on this island for 29 years after the war ended. He goes back. He thinks that Japan's gotten away from their traditional values, so he decides to leave. He moves to Brazil. He gets married. He writes a book called No Surrender, and it's the story of his time on this island. Later in life, he starts kind of like a Boy Scout thing for teaching young boys how to survive in woods and stuff. It's kind of a neat ending. He wasn't even the last one. He's the most famous one, which is why I wanted to talk about him. But he's not even the last holdout. There were holdouts that were found or gave up all through into the late 40s, and some in the 50s and the 60s, and then in the 70s. Hiroo Onoda in 1974, and then another guy, I can't remember his name, but I'll put it here. He was a colonial Japanese soldier, so he was Taiwanese, but he was actually he was the native tribe, I guess, from Japan. I can't remember exactly, but he didn't surrender. He was actually found on an island in Indonesia in late 1974, and arrested, and then he was sent home. He died a few years afterwards, and his story wasn't quite as compelling, I guess. There were a few others. There were rumors about possible other holdouts, but a lot of people think it was for Japanese tourism. There were a couple guys that came back to Japan later. They had fought with the Malaysian communists after World War II. They just kept fighting. They knew the war was over, though, it was a little bit of a different story. But anyway, I thought that this was pretty interesting, pretty crazy how somebody was out on this island for 29 years after the war ended, still fighting his own little war. Anyway, thanks for watching, grandkids. I hope you like this one.